Now the name of the book is very interesting, Reeling Roosters and Dancing Ducks. How did that name come about?
Well, there's a really famous puirt-a-beul, Rí na coilc dua, dancing na tunican, Reeling Roosters and Dancing Ducks, and I really felt like this kind of captured maybe some of the essence of puirt-a-beul. They're a bit silly. They often have an association with children, and I think that these kinds of words of animals dancing kind of bring up some of that. Animals often feature in puirt-a-beul, and just the terms of the dancing and the reeling was really important to me to get in there to really kind of convey that this is about dance music. So really it came from the words of a really prominently and well-known puirt-a-beul, and that's how I got it.
Great. Now, puirt-a-beul were at one time used for people to dance to. Tell me a bit more about that.
Well, that became one of the stickier chapters that I wrote in this book because for me, being located primarily in Cape Breton, my experience and understanding of them as dance accompaniment was to accompany Cape Breton step dancing, which is a solo form of dance that is made up on the spot in response to the music that the dancer is hearing. But that kind of dance is really no longer known in Scotland, and it's been very controversial as to whether it ever existed in Scotland, although dancers in Nova Scotia and Cape Breton are quite adamant that it did come down from their original ancestors that came from Scotland. So there's been a lot of discussion about whether Cape Breton step dance is a Scottish dance form or some kind of mix of different kinds of dancing. So if it's also known in Scotland, and if Scotland doesn't have this step dance form, well, what kind of dance did puirt-a-beul accompany in Scotland? And so that led me down the garden path as I started to try to figure out what it accompanied. And what it seems, it is used today to accompany sometimes Scottish country dancing, for example, which is a more social form of dance and a lot more formal than Cape Breton step dance. But it also seems pretty clear that it did accompany a form of solo step dancing in Scotland as well, but a little bit different than in Cape Breton today. So it seems like the dances that they accompanied would have been more predefined, of sort of choreographed. Certain steps would have been required as part of the dances, and those dances are named. So dances like the sword dance, we call it today, but Gilly Callum, or dirk dances, for example, or which a dirk is a small knife, and it's not the same thing as the sword dance, but would have involved some kind of a knife in the dance, or things like the Flowers of Edinburgh or something like that. So these were named dances, whereas in Cape Breton our step dancing is not named, it's just we step dance. So it's not entirely clear what kind of dance it originally accompanied, and quite frankly, maybe it accompanied many different kinds of dance from the very beginning. There's no real reason to think that it would have maybe just been associated with one particular form of dance.
Now, when did puirt-a-beul begin in the first place?
Another really big question. So there's two really popular theories that a lot of people talked about. One is that they emerged after the Act of Proscription, after the Battle of Culloden of 1746. And so there's some belief that puirt-a-beul emerged as a way of maintaining pipe tunes and dancing at a time when the bagpipes were supposedly outlawed. Now there's some debate as to whether they were truly outlawed, but even if they weren't really outlawed, it's clear that there would have been a sort of frowning upon that kind of culture, Highland culture and music. So some people believe that puirt-a-beul emerged to preserve those tunes at that time. There's another theory that's very similar, but it comes out 100 years later in sort of the late 19th century, which is the idea that in Protestant Gaelic-speaking areas, the Protestant islands, where there was more concern around whether secular music might be distracting people from the Bible and thoughts of God, that maybe any kind of secular music making would be inappropriate. And so there was a discouraging of using fiddles and pipes. Some say that these instruments were burned or actively destroyed by ministers, and that again, puirt-a-beul emerged as a way of kind of preserving these instrumental tunes and creating the opportunity for people to dance when they weren't supposed to. I'm not sure that either of those is really the answer. I do think that they seem to have emerged sometime in the 18th century, and they seem to have come to Scotland or have been developed in Scotland at the same time that our really popular dance tunes started to become popular in Scotland as well, and in Ireland and elsewhere, the sort of Celtic dance music that we know today. So I talk about this in the book. These are what we call binary dance tunes, where there's two parts, each part's repeated, and then the whole tune is repeated 2 or 3 times, depending on the place. And those are the dance tunes that we have to this day, and puirt-a-beul are in the exact same format. And we know that those dance tunes, but we're not exactly sure when those dance tunes started to come to Scotland, because books of those tunes didn't start being published until the 18th century, but they could have existed before that. But it seems that they came to Scotland, unlikely that they came much earlier than the end of, say, the 17th century. Certainly into the 18th century they were in Scotland, and puirt-a-beul also start coming out at this, they start to be documented, referred to, mentioned at around the same time, and they're consistent with that style of music as well.